Dr. Andrei Illarionov, welcome. You've worked closely with Putin in the past, and you're a prominent critic of his actions. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Thank you for inviting me. I was a critic of Mr. Putin even when I was still an advisor to him. I'm an economist by training, and I was advising him on economic issues. But when I saw that Mr. Putin is not right, and when he's incorrect in any other issues, I was critical both privately as well as publicly. For example, when he attacked company Yukos and put Mr. Khodorkovsky in jail, or when he attacked hostages in Beslan, or when he tried to establish a dictatorship in Russia when I was still an advisor to Mr. Putin. That is why I was probably the only person in the history of Russia who has been banned from appearing on the Russian TV while being an advisor to the current president. So for last year and a half, I was not allowed to appear on the Russian TV because of my critical position to a number of Mr. Putin's actions.
What's your take on Putin's Victory Day speech?
Mr. Putin definitely wanted to use this opportunity to proclaim a victory in Ukraine, whatever victory. But unfortunately for him, he was not able to do it. First of all, he wanted to establish control over whole Ukraine, as it was very clear from his statement on February 24th, when he launched this vicious campaign against Ukraine. He failed to do it. He definitely wanted to establish control over Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. He failed to do it. He wanted to establish control over Kharkiv, the second capital of Ukraine, and he was fighting for Kharkiv for almost 2 months. He failed to do it. He wanted to get Odessa, the largest seaport of Ukraine on the Black Sea, and he failed to do it. He wanted to expand his control over the territory of the two oblasts, two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, and even just they claim that that's a so-called official purpose of the campaign, and he failed to do it. He wanted to get at least Mariupol, the largest city port in the Sea of Azov, and he failed to do even that. So by May 9th, the Victory Day from the Second World War, Mr. Putin did not get anything to present to his nation, to the people of Russia, to anyone. He did not achieve anything. So instead of proclaiming victory or to refer to victory, he was forced to change his speech to something else. What is something else? It is not a victory speech, it's ideological speech.
And you've predicted that Putin would invade Ukraine when almost nobody else did at the time. What was your reasoning for that?
I did predict that Putin would go for Crimea right after the Russian-Georgian war in year 2008. And since year 2008 until year 2014, I kept saying that, okay, the next target is Crimea. And that happened, unfortunately. So in year 2014, Putin attacked Ukraine and occupied Crimea. And after that, I predicted that the next target will be Donbass. And 2 months later, Putin attacked Donbass. That time, nobody, neither in Russia nor in Ukraine, would believe that Putin would do it. Since year 2014, I started to talk that the main goal of Putin is to establish control over whole Ukraine, and his main target is Kyiv, capital of Ukraine. Nobody in Ukraine could believe in that prediction. Now, in year 2022, everybody understands that, yes, it is his goal. So, why it was possible to do it? The answer is very simple. I listened carefully what Putin is saying. He is pretty remarkably open in his plans. It's necessary only to listen to him and to read what he is writing and listen to him what he is saying. As you do it, you would understand his goals. Now, in his so-called Victory Day speech on May 9th, year 2022, Putin officially, openly proclaimed his goal is the same, to establish control over the whole Ukraine, to do so-called denazification of Ukraine. In his slang, denazification means de-Ukrainization of Ukraine, meaning to deprive Ukrainians from their ethnicity, from their identity, from their language, from their culture, to do it either with Russification of Ukraine or to deportation of Ukrainians or just with mass murder. That is proclaimed in his speech yesterday.
And what's the bigger picture? Does he have ambitions outside of Ukraine?
Definitely he has, and even there are several hints in his speech on May 9th. Whether he would be able to do it or not depends on what happened in the battlefield of Ukraine. So that is why it's a critical point in the European history, in the history of the modern world. Whether Putin will be able to do it depends on whether he will get victory in Ukraine or defeat. It is in interest of the whole world that Putin would get a defeat, a military defeat in Ukraine, and he would not be able to pursue his goals, neither in Ukraine, nor in any other neighboring countries, nor in Europe, nor in the whole world.
How far do his ambitions stretch, do you think?
He has already said not once that his goal, at least the current goal, is to so-called return to the 1997 division line in Europe, which means that the half of Europe, all Eastern and Central European countries, should be so-called denatoized, which means NATO should go out from these countries, and the line between the so-called NATO and Russian spheres of influence would be established as it was in 1997, which means that Putin, he himself, would establish his sphere of influence over half of Europe. That is his goal. He has made it public, he has made it clear, and he put this particular goal in the document that he officially presented to the US government back last December. And he has reiterated these goals in January, February, March this year.
Some accuse the US of helping to prolong the war in Ukraine rather than end it. What do you say to that?
I think United States administration, the current administration, did a lot to allow this war to happen, because United States administration did not support Ukraine in the critical moment before the war. Right now, United States administration does help Ukraine, and this is very important. But unfortunately, this help is not enough. We know that up to today, the United States government provided military aid to Ukraine at level $3.8 billion US dollars. $3.8 billion. Is it a lot or not too much? How much is it? Just every year during the Afghan war, United States spent more than $100 billion US dollars in Afghanistan. So that is why when the United States Army, with allies, with Afghan army, was facing Mojaheds from Taliban without any heavy equipment, without any jets, tanks, artillery, anything, just with the guns, and the number of Mojaheds was very limited. United States spent more than $100 billion US dollars a year. Now, Ukrainians are fighting with the second strongest army in the world, with tanks, with jets, with heavy artillery, with missiles, with navy, with everything. And the military aid from the United States is less than 4% of what it spends during the Afghan war. Right now, the share of United States in the total military to Ukraine fell from 53% that it was during the first months of the war to 38% in the second month, which means the share of the United States even that time was rather low. Now it's falling down. For example, such a country like Estonia, we understand that it's a real superpower in anything, but this Estonia provides military aid to Ukraine on a per capita basis, or as a share of GDP, or the share of military expenditures for Estonia, 70 times more than the United States. Just compare Estonia and the United States. So that is why probably it's correct that United States, by not helping enough Ukraine, is prolonging this war. Yes, prolonging, but not by helping, but helping not enough, not timely. Other countries like Estonia, Latvia, some Central European countries, Canada, United Kingdom, they are helping Ukraine much more in relative terms than the United States. The crucial moment how to end this war, the sooner it would increase substantially support from the United States to Ukraine.
And Beijing is closely watching Ukraine to see essentially if a conflict with Taiwan would fly. Do you think Putin has any interest in the Chinese Communist Party potentially taking over Taiwan?
Oh, definitely. And probably it was a calculation of Mr. Putin. If he attacks Ukraine, China would attack Taiwan. And that is why United States and the rest of the world will be busy in trying to resist on two fronts. But Chinese looks like are much smarter. And they are watching closely what is going on in Ukraine. And their calculations of their potential appetite for Taiwan depends critically on the success of Putin in Ukraine. For example, if Putin would succeed in Ukraine, it would give a very substantial support to Chinese for their ideas to take over Taiwan. But if Putin will be defeated in Ukraine, it will give Chinese more time and more food for thought whether to attack Taiwan or how to attack Taiwan and what to do in this regard. So that is why I would say propensity to attack Taiwan depends on success or failure of Putin in Ukraine.
What do you think the U.S. should do to maintain global peace going forward?
One of the most important lessons that we have already learned from the first almost 16 months of the current administration in the White House, that the peace and security in the world with the current dictators that do exist in many countries in the world can be achieved through strength. It cannot be achieved through soft diplomacy, soft debates or talks or loose talks or with release of so-called intelligence information. This so-called release of intelligence information that the current administration boosted as the very important instrument to prevent the war failed completely. It did not stop the war. Moreover, it did give, in fact, a green light for Putin to attack Ukraine. So that is not way to stop dictator, aggressor from his new old imperial ambitions. The way to stop the war, the way to secure peace and security for particular countries and for the whole world is to provide necessary resources for resistance. And if someone is demonstrating his desire to attack neighboring countries, to make all necessary preparations for that particular country who is going to be victim of the attack, that this country with allies with friends, would be able to repel aggression. And this is a very important one. Aggressor must be punished. Putin attacked Ukraine. It was not his first attack against other countries. Putin attacked, actually, he waged a war, bloody war in Chechnya, and he remained unpunished. Putin attacked Georgia in year 2008, and he remained unpunished. In year 2014, he occupied and tried to annex Crimea, and he remained unpunished. He waged war in Donbass, and he remained unpunished. And that is a situation when the aggressor remains unpunished is invitation for new aggressions, more aggressive, more vicious, much more sizable. So the way how to prevent a new war is to just punish aggressor right away. That is a way not to allow repetition of new aggressions.
So the U.S. is trying, and the West is trying sanctions as punishment. Would you say that's a start? Is that appropriate? Is it working?
It is another very important lesson. We have seen sanctions by themselves alone cannot stop an aggressor. First of all, those sanctions that have been introduced against Putin are substantial, no doubt. But first of all, they are very far from the level that is necessary to implement. For example, there is no oil embargo for a Russian export. There is no gas embargo. There is no embargo on all trade with Russia. Russia is still occupying the seat in the United Nations Security Council. So what kind of sanctions we are going to talk about? Because now the whole structure, whole architecture of international security based on Security Council, United Nations decisions. And now the aggressor is occupying the critical post in the most important body in the international security architecture. So that is why even in that area, sanctions are very far from the necessary level. But we also learned that sanctions by themselves cannot stop aggression. When tanks are rolling, whatever sanctions will be, whatever statement will be, whatever resolutions might be, they cannot stop those tanks. It's necessary to have a strength. That is why it is necessary to provide all necessary weapons, munitions, material, fuel to Ukraine, that Ukraine with allies and friends could resist this aggression. U.S. administration and the head of the U.S. CIA has said not once that they got this intelligence that Putin is going to attack Ukraine from the early autumn year 2021. So it is more than 6 months before the attack. So if they receive this intelligence, and they insisted that this intelligence is correct, they even published this intelligence regularly starting from October. So that is why they had this opportunity to provide necessary weapons to Ukraine. They could make statement that United States is with Ukraine. If they would make such a statement, Putin would never attack Ukraine. But instead of that, they withdraw military aid to Ukraine. They withdraw U.S. citizens from Ukraine. They withdraw U.S. diplomatic personnel from Ukraine. They relocate U.S. embassy from Kiev to Lviv in the west of Ukraine, and after that to Poland, by leaving Ukraine without any U.S. diplomatic presence during this attack. They even withdraw U.S. Navy from the Black Sea. How all those signs should be read by Putin? Only in one way. United States administration is giving a green light for him to attack Ukraine, because there is no U.S. presence in Ukraine. There is no U.S. military support. There is no U.S. diplomats. There is no U.S. citizens. There is no U.S. instructions on the territory of Ukraine. Moreover, even before the attack on Ukraine by Putin, United States invited President Biden, invited and offered Mr. Zelensky, President of Ukraine, to leave the country, to leave the capital, Kiev, and even the country. So how that should be interpreted in Ukraine and in Russia is only one way, that United States is not interested in defending Ukraine, in supporting Ukraine. And this is an invitation for Putin to attack Ukraine. And Putin read it exactly in this way. And that is why he attacked Ukraine. If the US administration would behave in a very different way by saying, okay, United States would not leave Ukraine alone, United States would provide all necessary weapons and would start to relocate weapons, or even maybe temporarily some US troops on the Ukrainian territory, not for participating in the war, but just for physical presence. It would send a very strong signal to Russia and to Putin that it's not a good idea to attack Ukraine, and he would wait. And that would not a beginning of the war, and it would save thousands, now we know tens of thousands of people from being killed in this war.
Why do you think the Biden administration behaved in that way that you've just described?
That's actually a big question, and I hope that the U.S. public opinion would ask those questions to the current administration, because United States must know the answers to this question, because it was a very clear, persistent policy of the current administration not to support Ukraine until Ukraine started to resist. There was a general belief that Kyiv would fall in 48 hours, that Ukraine will be taken in 72 hours. All the so-called US intelligence has been published in US press in January, in February, before the attack. It turns out completely wrong. Ukraine started to fight, and started to fight effectively. It was Ukraine who did not allow Mr. Putin's plans to be realized in Ukraine. And only later, as we know, just only 2 months later, around April 24th, 26th, the position of the current US administration, at least in its rhetorics, has changed dramatically. Instead of the fate of Ukraine is predetermined, as it was in February and in March, they changed this position. They are interested in the fact that Ukraine would win, and they would like to support Ukraine and would like to provide some military aid. But it happened 2 months later. Before that, the position of the administration was very much different.
Dr. Andrei Illarionov, thank you.
Thank you very much.